This is Mike Alber, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
Welcome to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, hosted by Gray Jones. You can follow me on Twitter, @GrayJones is my handle. You can find all of these podcasts online at youtube.com/Graham A. Jones, at scriptmag.com, or on the podcast website at tvwriterpodcast.com, where you can also find lots of other resources like the TV Writer Twitter database with Twitter handles for over 1,000 writers and links to hundreds of free TV scripts. Now, on to the episode.
This is Gray, and I'm here with Mike Alber, who podcast viewers will recognize from episode 35. But 4 years later, we're catching up with him as he is the co-creator and co-executive producer of Kirby Buckets on Disney XD.
Yep.
And so I'm really excited because today we're going to learn how you went from zombies to cartoons.
Right. Well, it's good to be here. Glad to catch up with you and your viewers.
Yeah. And so let's first rewind a little bit for anybody who hadn't seen that podcast. Your story is pretty amazing and pretty unique in the sense that you sold pitches, you became a staff writer before moving to Hollywood.
Yeah, that's true. Back up, I was in medical school for a second, and I said, this is not what I want to do. Wasn't sure what I really did want to do. But my friend Gabe Snyder and I from high school, we were sort of noodling around writing, feature-length scripts, and we kind of decided to make a go of it. He moved out to LA, where I was still trying to sort of figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I was getting an MFA in creative writing from Ohio State, and we were just talking about really trying to make this happen. And so we would enter contests, and we would slowly do a little bit better, and kind of like learn the craft just by like writing and reading and reading other screenplays, and then eventually we sort of attracted the attention of a small production company, and that led to an option, and that led to some meetings at some TV companies, sort of friends of friends kind of thing. We would sort of develop contacts and then meet some of their contacts. So that was sort of how it happened. And then, I would not have been able to sell shows or land a staff job without coming out quite a bit. I wasn't officially living out here, but I was spending maybe a quarter to a third of my time out in LA. And then, finally, we'd gotten an agent, and our agent had, called us up and said, hey, there's this MTV show called Death Valley, and they're staffing up, and they really liked your sample that we'd written for Spike TV, and they want to meet you guys. And so I could not leave Ohio at the time. My daughter had just been born. She was still in the hospital at the time. Wow. So to do this interview, so Gabe went in, and I went on the phone, and just was sort of pacing around, not knowing if this was the right thing to do or not. But I was very excited about the opportunity, and thankfully, my wife is a saint, and she supported that, and we got the job somehow. But again, it is a pretty unique story, and most people I don't think are gonna find success without actually coming out. But I had the added benefit of having a writing partner that lived out here, and in a pinch could sub in for me or represent our partnership without me if need be.
Which is a very important caveat.
Yes. Don't try to be a TV writer from Lincoln, Nebraska. You can work on the craft, you can practice, you can read up, you can do all that stuff, but you're probably not going to get hired on anything until you come out, and even then, there's no guarantees. So
yeah, so that does catch us up to 2011,
right?
Which is where we left off on episode 35. And I do urge viewers to go back to episode 35. You can find it at tvwriterpodcast.com and watch the full episode because Mike went into great detail about that journey, and also a lot of tips on especially on generating new ideas. So do highly recommend that. But Now we're going to sort of bring us from that point to the present, because
Right.
you're writing about cops and zombies and other supernatural creatures, but an MTV kind of flair.
Yeah.
And then you went to Nickelodeon. And
Yep.
how did that happen?
So what ended up happening was that Death Valley job was a great job, and I've met a lot of people I'm still close friends with. Great first experience, but it was a really short-term job. And so we were only in the writer's room on that for maybe 7 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, and then we were sort of done. And looking for whatever the next gig was. And then so 2011, which was the year that I officially moved out, so that was 2010. So 2011, the year I officially moved out, was kind of a dry year. Death Valley didn't get renewed for a second season, which is a bummer, but happens. And we didn't really have much success in getting on another gig. We were pitching and we were developing new material and we were writing new material, but we just didn't have success in finding that next staffing job until around the end of 2011. There were things picked up a little bit, and we had a meeting with Disney XD. It was just a general meeting, and talk to them about some ideas, but mostly it was a getting to know you kind of thing. And they told us they really wanted to do a hybrid show, which was live action, but also had animation and maybe featured a kid animator. And did we have any ideas for that? So we didn't, but we went back and thought about some things and sort of went back and forth with them. And then right around that same time, we got a call for another staffing interview with some showrunners for a Nickelodeon show. And, kids TV wasn't really where I saw my career starting out. Initially, MTV horror comedy, so that's a pretty far cry, but a lot of great TV is being made all over. So, you can't, on one hand, so that's good. And beggars can't be choosers on the other hand.
Yeah.
And thankfully the show that we were interviewing for there at the beginning of 2012 was Super Ninjas, which was sort of an action comedy, single camera also, and had a lot of really fun elements to it. And had some great people there as well, so we got a good feeling from them, and they liked us and offered us that gig. And so one thing I think that is, I don't know if it's a common misconception, but it's certainly something that I didn't think about is when you decide I really want to be a TV writer, you might think about the kind of shows that you love. If you're a comedy fan, maybe you really want to write for Veep, or maybe you really want to write for, like Parks and Rec, or, Brooklyn Nine-Nine or something like that. But there are only a select few shows that are those, kind of prestige shows that you really would love to work for, that you really love, and maybe they're not hiring, and so honing your craft in a wide variety of shows is really common. Working in single cams and multicams, working in kids TV and adult TV and animation and live action. If you look at the IMDb profiles of a lot of very successful writers, you'll see a progression, of different kinds of shows, and those writers honing their sort of personal voices and slowly working to the place where they can sort of do the kinds of shows that they want to work on, or eventually getting that opportunity. Most first-time writers don't end up on the show that they initially want to write on. It's just sort of the way that it works. So there's always something to learn at even on a show that that you think is not exactly in your wheelhouse. If if you've got an eye for, dialogue, you can make the dialogue and that, animation script sparkle, or even if it's, if the multicam and you're really more of a single cam person, like hone your joke writing ability, hone your joke pitching ability. I mean, those are, those are certainly places where you can get better, even if it's not the ideal show for you. And but that being said, I mean, I really enjoyed working on Super Ninjas, and during that process, we were also sort of pitching what became Kirby Buckets and getting that sold at the beginning of 2012. So it's and having that experience probably helped us to write a better Kirby Buckets script. Having worked a little bit in kids TV and kids single camera specifically, like helped us write a better script, I think.
I know John Cleese talks about intermediate possibles, where to get to the idea that you want, you might have to go through one that's not ideal. But you can't get from A to C without going through B.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some people, you do hear the magic stories of somebody has a great idea for a show, and, they get somebody powerful interested and they sell it and they end up running the room or co-running it or whatever. And, they're immediately on the show that they want to be on. And that does happen, but I don't think that's most people's experience, and there's always something to learn from any show that you're on. And, maybe even more importantly, there are people on those shows who will go on to other projects who, if you are a good person to work with, and if you're a, like a normal, fun person, they're going to want to work with you on their next project, or that showrunner goes to something else, or the network really likes the scripts that you're writing and they want to develop with you. Like all of that is how you build a network. So, to turn your nose up at a job because it might not be like an ideal job seems silly to me.
Well, I do think there's a balance. I think you have to have your head in the game. There's a lot of people who are told to focus on one genre because it helps the representation to sell you when they've got you in a certain box.
Sure.
And people are told, especially early in your career, how that can be helpful. If they know you're the zombie guy, they can go to all the people who make zombie stuff and say, this is a zombie guy.
Sure.
But I think at the same time, if you're confined to a certain box and you miss out on work, you might not end up lasting very long.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference too between when you're starting out and when you're writing samples, be it pilots or spec episodes of something. You do want to develop a consistent voice, even if you're doing a multicam pilot and a single cam pilot. Like, you want to have sort of a consistent sensibility, between them. Like, if you really love genre stuff, then maybe it's not as important for you to have a procedural in your back pocket, unless it's like a genre procedural, but it is important to do that on your own, like writing on your own. But I think that in terms of being like offered a job, if the showrunner thinks you're going to bring something to that show and they're willing to hire you, I think even if it's not your ideal show, there aren't enough shows and aren't enough jobs out there, to turn it down because it's not perfect. So I think you want to, if the show's not perfect for you, then, just make sure that you're developing your own stuff on the side, like spend your nights and weekends, crafting your, Mad Men script that you can shop around later. If that's what you really want to do, is a, 60s period, drama. But you're stuck on, a family sitcom, whatever it is. But it makes sense to diversify a little, but I think it does sort of depending on the position of your career and what you're talking about, to also, develop a specific voice so that your agent, you're the zombie guy, you're the, the crazy action guy, you're the, the procedural girl, whatever. So make sure that, I believe that's true as well. But, it's sort of, I wouldn't turn down a job because it's not exactly in my wheelhouse.
And Kirby Buckets has been good to you.
Yeah.
And so you said you were developing that sort of at the same time that you were on Super Ninjas?
Yeah. So that process kind of took a long time. We sold it in 2012, in the beginning of 2012. And we developed it with the network, and we came up with the the script, and they really liked the script that we wrote for them, and so they greenlit a pilot, which is great and exactly what we wanted. And the trouble was that pilot, just for one reason or another, whether it was casting or just like in development, and it sort of shifted away from what it kind of did best, and we weren't even sure exactly what the show did best. So we made a pilot that looked good, but that didn't test particularly well, and Disney wasn't as excited about it. And so what they said to us was, listen, we still really believe in this idea. What we'd like to do is to just write another pilot and see what happens.
Oh, wow.
So we got the chance, and you don't often get this in life. My writing partner, Gabe, always says, to get this chance to do something again, knowing what you know now.
Wow.
Knowing what the pitfalls are, knowing the things that you would avoid if you could. We had that opportunity, and so we took it. So we took some more chances, and we went a little bit bigger, and we just we wrote a pilot that we didn't think was producible, in fact, because it was a road pilot. It was Kirby's this animator, and he has his two friends, and they were on the road trying to get from school to the event center where this important animation design contest was happening, but they didn't have a ride there, so it became sort of like a mini road movie. And when we were writing it, we were having a blast, but we didn't think it was producible at all. But we decided to stop worrying about that, and that was one of the things that, one of the lessons that we had learned. And so, some characters were created, some characters disappeared, just to hone in on what we felt the show really did well. And then Disney really liked that pilot, and so we brought in a guy that Gabe and I had worked with on a few other shows, Chris Brown, not that Chris Brown, K-R-I-S Brown, and he was a producer level writer, or a supervising producer maybe on Death Valley, and he was a co-EP, he was a co-EP on Super Ninjas as well. And so we knew him really well, and Disney really wanted to work with him, and he had some ideas for the pilot. And more importantly, he had producing experience, which Gabe and I lacked, sorely lacked. And so Disney brought him in, and we were very excited to have him on board, because he really did make the pilot a lot better. He brought it up to a higher level. And he had experience on live action, of course, but also in animation. He was one of the head writers on Beavis and Butthead.
Oh,
so,
wow.
He'd had a lot of animation experience as well. So, he brought a lot of that to bear and made the show that much better. And we shot the pilot again, which was great. And it turned out really well, and Disney was happy, and it tested well. And so it took an extra year to find what the show wanted to be and do, and then we eventually found it. And thankfully, Disney gave us that chance.
Wow, yeah, which is very rare.
Yeah, that's not super common.
Yeah,
we had a almost entirely new cast as well. Originally in the first pilot. Jake Short, who'd done other work with Disney before, was our Kirby. And when the first pilot didn't get picked up, he ended up going to another pilot with them and ended up on that show. So he wasn't available, and we wanted to sort of rejigger things anyway. So we brought on Jacob Bertrand, who'd done some work with from Nickelodeon and some other things, and he was great, and we were really excited to get him and to get our whole cast. I think the cast of the show is like one of its big strengths. I mean, writers like to think they do all of this work, and they do, and a lot of times uncredited, and that's too bad. But once you're actually getting to the stage of producing something, as a writer, who hasn't done that much, you sort of realize how important actors are in bringing sort of subtle nuances and finding funny moments that weren't there before, and our entire cast is just so good at that kids just ate it up, boys and girls, and it tested very well. So Disney was excited and ordered 20 episodes for the first season. So that was a great moment, and watching kids, through that the one-way mirror there, and seeing them watch something that you wrote and laughing and responding to it, and answering questions about it afterwards. It was very gratifying, and it was really a really fun experience to watch them and really enjoy the show. So.
Wow. And so you actually got to be there at the test screenings.
Yeah. One of the great things about Disney and about Chris is that they want us involved, and they care about our opinions. I mean, to a certain extent, and so we've been able to get so much great experience, from being on set and delivering notes to a director and talking to the actors about line delivery, about the intention of a scene, or to being in an editing bay and working on the cut of an episode and how it comes out, and learning about how that really is its own art, and putting that together really can change the way an episode feels and looks, and all the way to listening to and picking out the theme song for the show. Like there have been so many little steps, and thankfully our showrunner and the network have let us be involved in most of them, which has been great, and a really eye-opening experience.
Very cool. So there's a couple of things that I'd love to hit here.
Sure.
One of them is, how much do you think this second pilot that you did is just sort of a matter of honing what you had and putting together a dream team, or how much is something that you might take into the first time of a new pilot?
I think our experience was, we definitely honed what was working in the first pilot, but we also changed a bit as well. And there were things that, once you start thinking about this is going to be produced, you start thinking about things like producibility and like, can we shoot this, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes that can kind of be the enemy of like coming up with the best thing. You come up with the easily producible thing. So definitely having this second chance freed us up a little bit. And like I said, we created a whole new character. Fish was not in the first pilot. And then so the group of friends became a group of 3 instead of just a pair. And Kirby's sister Dawn didn't have a friend in the first pilot, and so we gave her a friend in the character of Belinda, someone to bounce ideas off of, someone to get on her own sort of B storylines with, And so that was important to discover that, and that was sort of honed from what we learned from the first pilot, but also, just being free to, to say like, okay, what do we want this to be was important as well.
And so would you say that's something that you take to future projects to say, you're gonna just make it as unproducible as it needs to be, but like
I wouldn't advise to make it unproducible, but I think that I would advise to, if it's a comedy, like write what makes you laugh. If you're reading it and you're not smirking a little bit, if it doesn't elicit any sort of humor, like maybe you're playing it too safe, or it's certainly something that I've seen in reading lots of scripts for staffing of the show, is there's a lot of scripts out there that are very competently done, and they're not bad scripts. They're, you could imagine the show being on CBS next season, but it might not be as exciting or fun. And I think one of the things that I've learned from that process, and from the process of getting a chance to do the second pilot, is, you got to do something that you're going to want to watch on TV, that you'd get excited about, not just something that you could imagine being on TV, something that is going to, drum up some real enthusiasm from someone else that's reading it. Because the best pilots that I've read in staffing for this show have been pilots that maybe they weren't super producible. Maybe they had a very specific, defined comedic voice, and they were funny. Like, I was genuinely laughing early and often, and they, maybe I couldn't imagine the network that they would go on, but I was along for a fun ride, and that was, to me anyways, and Gabe and I have talked about this a lot, for our own writing and future projects, not to worry about, what might be hot, what might be trending right now, what might be, what you could imagine being on TV, for both pitches and samples, as much as, what's the piece of writing that's going to sell me as a writer, like that's going to showcase what I do really well, and not what I think might sell, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and don't play it safe.
Yeah, I think that's a good good axiom to follow. If you're playing it too safe, it's very easy to just blend in with the 100 other scripts on a showrunner's desk, if you're playing it really safe. So I would definitely just say, do what you're interested in, and what's exciting to you, and what's funny to you, and that your enthusiasm for it will come through on the page naturally.
Now let's talk a little bit about, so you were the co-creator of the idea. Now, was Chris there from the beginning, or brought on later in the process?
He was brought on after the first pilot was made, so Gabe and I, my writing partner, we are the co-creators of the show, and so when we developed the idea with Disney, we worked with them back and forth, and we went in by ourselves and we pitched it. But in truth, once they like the idea and we've written a script for them and they're going to greenlight that, there's no real reason for any network to believe that Gabe and I would be able to actually deliver a product to them, because we hadn't done it before. I mean, we'd been staff writers on Death Valley, we'd been staff writers on Super Ninjas, and then on another Nickelodeon show that we were working on while we were developing it, called The Thundermans. But those three shows, I mean, we were staff writers. We were not even, co-producer level. So, we had to bring in somebody, and Disney rightfully brought in, Chris on that second pilot to really figure out, how to make, this crazy semi-unproducible pilot actually work. So that was good.
And so he acts as the showrunner now?
Yeah, so he acts as the showrunner. He's an executive producer level, and Gabe and I are sort of number twos on the show, and so Chris will be, he will be in editing, he'll be in like a mixing session, he'll be making notes on the animation in the show, he'll be making notes on music, and answering questions, being in production meetings, doing any one of the million things that a showrunner has to do that Gabe and I would have no idea how to do, which allows us to focus on a few areas. We're sort of focused on being in the writer's room and running that and sort of shaping the kinds of stories we want to tell. And occasionally we'll be on set to, help shape the kinds of, the ways that these, stories are brought to life. And, occasionally we'll be in the editing room to sort of, again, like shaping and building the episode. But, Chris does so much work on that show. I look at his work ethic, and it's amazing. And we're just truly like, blessed to have him. I mean, Gabe and I share an office, and we look at each other all the time and just like, I am so glad we are not showrunning this show. Not only because I wouldn't know how to do it, it's just the level of commitment and work that he puts into the thing is amazing, and has made the show just so much better.
Wow. And so now, were you and Gabe and Chris all together in choosing the staff for the show?
Yeah. So that's another thing that Chris didn't have to let us be a part of, but he was very much, collaborative and wanting to build the staff together of people that we thought we could work with and people that we were excited about. So a lot of times, we would get scripts from the network, we'll get scripts from our agent, from his agent, from just agencies in general would send us things, and so we would just read through, as many of these as we could each day and try to, make a couple of piles, the yes, no, maybe piles, and it's hard to get on that yes list, because it's really easy to just blend in. But thankfully, in making these decisions, I have, two other guys to sort of talk with about, well, what did you think about this guy? Like, I really liked his dialogue, but maybe the structure of the story wasn't great, or this woman did a really nice job with these jokes. Like, I was laughing a lot, but her act breaks were kind of weak. Do we need a joke person in the room? Do we need, or are we looking for somebody that's more, solid in structure? That's the kind of conversations and decisions. It's nice to have other people there who've read it as well, and so if somebody felt strongly about someone and maybe another person was sort of ambivalent about them, maybe we'd ask for a second piece of material, or maybe we would meet them and see how it went. But yeah, it was nice to have some other people to bounce opinions on, because you trust your gut on these things, but it's also, art is subjective, and maybe I just didn't love a character, or I didn't love like a choice of pilot, but there's something there that I missed. So it's nice to have other people to talk to about that.
And how big is the staff?
Oh, let's see. We've got, for the second season, we had 4 staff writers, a consulting producer, another consulting producer had sort of came in halfway through and helped us out when we needed that. Then Gabe and I at co-EP level, another dude at co-EP level, and then Chris at EP. So yeah, so it's a decently sized staff. It's not a small room, but it's not huge either. When people go off on script and you're in the middle of production, we had 26 episodes for the second season.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of times, you'd have like 2 or maybe even 3 people off on either writing an outline or writing a script or revising or something, and so the room would sort of shrink when you had. So it's nice to have a few people in there to keep the room going, even when you lost some to to working on their own or to working on scripts.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. Going 20 first season, 26 second season. Obviously, Disney's pretty invested in this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to, one of the good things about kids TV is the orders are pretty big, compared to network TV. And, if they order 26 episodes, there's a very good chance you're going to shoot those 26 episodes. I mean, I suppose it probably has happened before, but it's not likely that, you get canceled after 2 or 3. Like for the most part, if they order that, like they're sort of, the financials are such that it makes sense for them to produce those episodes, and it does seem like that Disney XD really likes the show, and that's been really gratifying, and because we like it, we like making it, and we think it's a good show, but it's nice for other people to get behind it, put the money where the mouth is, kind of thing. So yeah.
Well, very, very cool, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And so now we've been caught up to the present. Second season is well underway.
Yep.
And from your perspective, it's in the can. But
Yeah, we've shot all 26 episodes. Chris is still working on notes, and we'll occasionally chip in with we'll go to a mix or something like that, or a voiceover session. But for the most part, we're just waiting to hear back for season 3.
Wow, very cool. So tell me about lessons learned as a writer, just personally. You and Gabe, when you're in this downtime between seasons, are you still going out with pitches? Are you still taking meetings, or are you totally focused on Kirby? And how are you approaching your writing now?
Well, it's contractually, we could pitch something new, but it's not going to be likely that another network will buy something from us because, Kirby is in first position, they call it. And so if Kirby gets brought back for a season 3, whatever job we were on or whatever pitch we had sold or whatever would have to take a back seat to that. And so networks know that, and unless you're working with the same network and they think you can sort of like work around it and do 2 things at once, we're really sort of focused on Kirby in terms of pitching, but it's really nice to be able to sort of flex some other muscles as well, because we've written now 46 episodes of Kirby, so I'm very familiar with those characters in that world, and so it's nice to write write other kinds of jokes, other kinds of characters. Gabe and I are working on just a new sample now, just to have something for when Kirby does finally not come back, whenever that is. So we have something like in the bank that we can go out with for staffing season, or we can try to sell. And then we'll probably work on pitches, but we probably won't go out with anything.
I see.
Yeah.
So have stuff in your bag for when you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's one of the lessons that I kind of learned early on, is that projects, even when they look like they're going well, or something's there's some movements, there's some heat behind it, it's always good to have lots of irons in the fire, because projects can die at the drop of a hat for reasons that are totally beyond your control. If you have a director that's interested, he signs on to do something else, all of a sudden that project's kind of dead for a little bit. Or it's not dead, it's just sort of hibernating. And so you want to have something else that you're working on that you can pivot to, because no one likes to be caught flat-footed. And this is a business where job security is hard to come by. And so the more projects you're working on, you can sort of develop job security by not putting all your eggs in one basket. So when you're on a show, it's sort of tough, because all of your time and energy is invested into that show. But when you're out in between shows, or in between jobs, or in between seasons even, it's always good to be working on something else, so that when the thing that you think is never going to die eventually dies, it's good to have the next thing ready to go.
And are you thinking you'd stay in the kid space, or are you getting
out
of the kid space?
I don't know. I mean, I'm having a blast right now. I did not think that Gabe and I would end up in kids TV, but we're here now, and Disney has been great about letting us do the kind of, ridiculous, crazy show that we want to do, and so that's been a really good experience. I would rather work on, a show like this than something that, even if it was an adult show that I didn't really believe in, And so it's nice to, and it's also nice to have that experience and have developed a network of writers and execs and producers and people that I know in this space. So that's been good. But, I'm definitely open to, adult stuff too. And I know that, that's where I thought I was going to end up. So, I short answer is I don't know. It kind of depends on what opportunities come along and, where we get the most traction.
Very cool. So we're getting close to wrapping up here, but we usually wrap up with breaking in tips. Now you've had a few more years under your belt. You've lived here for
I've lived
more
here
years.
For a while, yeah.
And so now that you're at this stage, what would you say to somebody who's just arrived in LA and wants to work in this industry?
Well, I think the advice about diversifying a little bit is good advice. You don't want to have just one piece of material that you're really passionate about and it's going to be this or nothing. You want to have a few pieces. If you attract a manager, somebody that's willing to read something, chances are, they're going, even if they love that piece of material, they're going to want to read something else because, they're interested in your career. So, a single piece of material can get you a job. It can probably get you an agent. It can get you a sale potentially, but, you're much better off having a few different pieces of material. We talked about diversifying a little bit, but then keeping sort of a honed, voice, writerly voice there, whatever it is that you love to do, whatever makes you on the page, coming through and all that material, but different kinds of pieces so that, so a showrunner, so that an agent or manager, so that a network exec knows that you're not a one-trick pony is good. And then just a piece of advice from having read all of these scripts, as part of the staffing process, I think it is important that you write something that you're excited about, that showcases, if it's a comedy, showcases your comedic sensibility. If it's a drama, showcases the kind of stories that you want to tell, the kind of characters you want to explore. Because, if you have this chance, you want to get the job or not get the job based on who you actually are, not on who you think that person is looking to hire, because that's a lot of math to do, and you might not be wrong or you might not be right in what you assume they're looking for. A lot of the I don't think any of the people we ended up hiring on Kirby gave us a kids show sample,
Interesting.
So, but we could tell from their adult network pilots, what kind of sensibility they had, the kind of jokes, there's sort of a silliness here that would really go well with Kirby, or they're writing precocious children, and Kirby's a really Ferris Bueller kind of kid, and so that would translate well, or their structure there is really tight. This is just a really impressive piece of craft here, that's that stuff is you don't know what's going to be important, and so writing what's exciting to you is the best chance of exciting someone else about you, I think. So rather than doing what you think they're going to want to see. Wow,
very cool. That's actually a great place to end up as well. And I do thank you so much for your time,
Sure.
and congratulations again on Kirby Season 2, and we're hoping for Season 3.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
We should find out soon. But, hopefully we're doing this in 4 more years, and, I've got a whole bunch of other stories to tell.
Yeah, very cool. And people can find you on Twitter at @malber.
Yes, so if you want to follow the show, I have sort of 2 Twitter accounts.
Yeah.
I've got @malber and then @malber2000, which is where I talk more about the show and sort of promote that a little bit.
Very cool. Well, thanks again for your time, and best of luck to you.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here. Thanks.
I want to thank this week's sponsors.
Blackmagic Design, makers of DaVinci Resolve 12 edit software, and much more at blackmagicdesign.com. If you've got kids 8 and under, they're going to love the fun animated songs at abc123songs.com.
I want to remind you that you can follow me on Twitter @GrayJones is my handle for the latest updates. And as always, there are tons of resources at tvwriterpodcast.com. You can find all of these podcasts on YouTube at youtube.com/Graham A. Jones. See you next time.